Have you ever caught yourself scrolling through social media, desperately counting likes? Have you ever stayed late at a job that crushes your soul because it looks impressive to others? Have you ever said yes to someone when every fiber of your being wanted to scream no just because you feared their judgment? If you answered yes to any of these, you're living in what Friedrich Nietzsche called the most dangerous prison of all, a prison where the bars are made of other people's expectations, and you hold the key but refuse to use it because you've forgotten it even exists. Today, I want to tell you why a 19th century philosopher believed you should become your own god. Not because he was arrogant or blasphemous, but because he understood something most people spend their entire lives running from: the terrifying, liberating truth that you are already creating your own reality. The only question is whether you're doing it consciously or letting others do it for you. Imagine for a moment that everyone whose approval you seek suddenly disappeared. Your parents, your friends, your colleagues, that mysterious audience in your head that judges every decision you make. In that silence, in that complete solitude, what would you choose? Who would you become? What would matter to you? That uncomfortable feeling you just experienced, that's the sound of your authentic self trying to speak. And it's been suffocated by what Nietzsche called the death of God. Now, before you think this is about religion, let me stop you. When Nietzsche declared God is dead, he wasn't celebrating atheism. He was diagnosing a crisis: the collapse of absolute authorities, traditional moral systems, and external sources of meaning. He saw that humanity was entering an age where the old rulebooks no longer worked, where the external voices that once told us what to value had lost their power. But here's what most people missed about his message. This wasn't a tragedy. It was an invitation. An invitation to become what he called the Übermensch. Not Superman, as bad translations suggest, but something far more profound. The human being who has learned to create their own values instead of inheriting them like hand-me-down clothes that never quite fit. Think about your life right now. How many of your goals are truly yours? How many of your fears come from disappointing people whose opinions shouldn't even matter to you? How many times have you betrayed your own instincts because someone else's voice seemed louder, more authoritative, more convincing than your own inner wisdom? This is the cage Nietzsche wanted to free you from. The cage of living by borrowed values, inherited expectations, and secondhand dreams. But breaking free isn't simple. Nietzsche understood this. He described the process as 3 metamorphoses, 3 stages of psychological evolution that every person who wants to reclaim their power must go through. First comes the camel stage. This is where most people live their entire lives. The camel is strong, patient, capable of carrying enormous loads. But what is it carrying? The weight of society's shoulds. You should get a stable job. You should settle down. You should be grateful. You should not ask for too much. You should be normal. The camel says, "Give me more to carry. I can handle it." And society gladly obliges. More expectations, more rules, more ways to measure your worth against external standards. The camel believes that if it carries enough, if it proves its strength and endurance, it will finally earn love, respect, recognition. But the camel, no matter how strong, remains a beast of burden. It never questions the load it carries. It never asks who decided these weights were worth carrying in the first place. This is where the second transformation becomes crucial. The camel must become a lion, the lion who learns to say no, the lion who roars, "I will," in the face of "thou shalt." This is the rebellion stage. And it's terrifying because it means looking at everything you thought you wanted and asking the uncomfortable question, is this really mine? The lion destroys. It tears down the inherited value system, rejects the shoulds, refuses to carry what it didn't choose. When you become the lion, people get uncomfortable. They call you selfish, difficult, changed. They say you're going through a phase. They try to guilt you back into the camel stage because your refusal to carry their expectations threatens their own unexamined lives. But destruction alone isn't enough. The lion can say no to the old world, but it cannot create a new one. For that, a third transformation is necessary. The lion must become a child. The child is the creator, the innocent one who looks at the world with fresh eyes and says, "This is what I choose to value. This is what brings me joy. This is what I decide matters." The child doesn't destroy out of anger like the lion. The child creates out of love, curiosity, authentic desire. This is the sacred yes that comes after the sacred no. This is where you stop living reactively and start living creatively. This is where you become your own god. But what does this look like in practice? How do you know if you're living by your own values or still carrying someone else's load? Here's a test Nietzsche proposed, brutal in its honesty. Imagine you had to live your exact life, with all its choices, mistakes, and consequences, over and over again for eternity. Every relationship, every career decision, every moment of compromise or authenticity, repeated endlessly. Would you choose it? Would you say yes to this life as it is? This is what he called the eternal return. Not a literal belief, but a psychological tool. A way of asking, am I living a life I can fully embrace, or am I sleepwalking through someone else's dream? Most people, if they're honest, would feel terror at this thought, because they're living lives they don't truly want, pursuing goals that don't truly fulfill them, seeking approval from people they don't truly respect. But the person who has become their own god, they look at their choices with fierce pride, not because their life is perfect, but because it's authentically theirs. They've stopped seeking external validation because they've learned to validate themselves. They've stopped fearing judgment because they've learned that most judgment comes from people who are terrified of their own freedom. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or cruel. It means becoming selective. It means recognizing that your energy, your time, your presence are finite resources that deserve to be invested wisely. It means understanding that you cannot save everyone, fix everything, or make everyone happy, and that trying to do so is not noble. It's a form of cowardice. The cowardice of not wanting to face the responsibility of your own choices. The cowardice of preferring familiar misery to uncertain freedom. The cowardice of letting others decide what your life should look like, because making that decision yourself feels too overwhelming. But here's what Nietzsche understood that most self-help gurus miss. This transformation isn't comfortable. When you stop seeking validation, some people will reject you. When you start living by your own values, you'll be misunderstood. When you refuse to carry loads that aren't yours, you'll be called selfish. This is the price of authenticity. This is what it costs to become your own god. And not everyone is willing to pay it. Are you? Are you ready to disappoint people who never truly saw you anyway? Are you ready to lose relationships that were built on who you pretended to be rather than who you actually are? Are you ready to face the terrifying, exhilarating responsibility of creating your own meaning? Because if you're not, you'll remain a camel forever, carrying other people's expectations until your back breaks. You'll spend your life seeking approval from people whose opinions shouldn't matter, pursuing goals that will never satisfy you, living by rules you never agreed to follow. But if you are ready, if something in you recognizes the truth in these words, then you're already beginning the transformation. You're already starting to question the load you're carrying. You're already hearing the lion's roar in your chest. The path to becoming your own god doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with small acts of self-honoring, saying no without justification, choosing silence over explanation, pursuing what excites you rather than what impresses others, trusting your own judgment even when it contradicts popular opinion. This is how you stop being available for other people's dreams and start building your own. This is how you move from reaction to creation, from borrowed values to authentic choice, from the prison of external approval to the freedom of self-determination. You already have everything you need to begin. The only question is, will you use it? Will you finally pick up the key to your own cage and walk free? Or will you continue to pretend that someone else holds the power to validate your existence? The choice, as it always has been, is yours. Choose like the god you already are.